Excellent. If everyone's ready to go, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to the Tuesday, November 17th Sewage Commission meeting. And as always, I'll start by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territories of the Comox First Nation. And we'll move straight into agenda item C, management report. Somebody would like to move or see to that? And are there any questions on the management report? Seeing none, is anyone opposed to receipt of the management report? And not hearing any opposition, that passes unanimously. And we'll move into section D, reports. Number one is the Sewage Management Advisory Committee minutes. Somebody would like to move receipt? And would staff like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you very much. Chris LaRose is here and will provide a brief presentation and answer any of your questions regarding this.
This is on the committee minutes?
Sorry.
Yeah, so we'll get to you guys in just a sec. Is there anyone opposed to receipt of the Management Advisory Committee minutes? And seeing none, that passes unanimously. And on to number two, potential for a Comox Valley Sewage Service sanitary dumping station. If somebody would move that, please. Excellent, and I'll pass it over to staff.
Okay, great. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. So this report is reporting back on a June 2020 Sewage Commission motion directing staff to look at or assess the viability of a sanitary dumping station somewhere within the Comox Valley Sewage Service. So there is clearly a lack of available options for local RV owners and those that are in transit across our region. And our analysis since then has confirmed that this is a service that is often provided by local governments. So the analysis has not raised any flags from a capital or operating cost perspective. There's no consensus yet at the staff level whether this station should be free or a fee for service. But this, as well as all of the other operational decisions, would be worked out together if we move forward with the concept. I guess the bottom line is that it's definitely a viable concept, and regional and municipal staff are ready to work together to identify an appropriate spot if the Sewage Commission directs us to pursue the matter further. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, thanks very much, Chris. I know that we've received lots of letters about this, and that's obviously why we decided to move on it. So thanks very much to staff for bringing forward this report. Are there any questions from the commission? And I'll pass it over to Director Grant.
I'm just wondering how much need there would be. Is one of these stations enough for the valley, or would we be looking at maybe another one shortly in the future?
It's difficult to ascertain. Currently, RV users are, I think it's probably safe to assume that the significant majority of RV users are either using the Cumberland facility or a private facility at a campground that they've come from or going to. It's those hopefully a small minority that are not waiting to get to one of those more remote facilities and are just pulling, stopping on the side of the road somewhere and letting it go into the ditch. So that's obviously the kind of the main driver for considering this, is to address that type of illegal dumping. But it's hard to say what level of use this facility would see. But that being said, we will have to, if we are going to pursue this option or this concept, we'll have to find a way to kind of predict the throughput to help us size the facility. But right now, I don't really have an answer to that. Okay.
And Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. I guess following that point, if this recommendation was to go through, would there be more than one location selected so that there would be some options if we did want something further down the road? Or would it be just identifying one location?
The intention would be to identify a single location, but as part of that process, we would at some point be looking at a range of options. So in the future, if it was decided that an additional facility would be required, we could always revisit that options
Right,
analysis.
so part of the
Yeah.
research would be kind of identifying a menu of options as
Yes.
part of that process.
Yeah, we would definitely be looking to assess, at least 2 or 3 options.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any more questions. The report did talk a little bit about Cumberland's sandy dump, and it sounds like that one's operating for free. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah. And so I guess we're basically assuming that this would be another free sandy dump, and we would just sort of cover the costs in our regular operations.
Actually, we're not clear on that question yet. There's definitely more thought and discussion to have on whether it should be a free or fee for service. There are pros and cons to both approaches.
We could flush those out as we possibly.
Exactly.
Yeah, none intended. So, I have Director Minions. Did I get you? Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. I know this is a preliminary report. I'm just wondering if the thought is that there'd be able to be land use of the CVRD or municipality that's already in place, or that the cost could be potentially more if land does have to be acquired, if most most municipal facilities are on their own land sites or kind of have to be specific, if that would be affect cost.
That's a really good point. The assumption is definitely that that there wouldn't be any land costs. If it turns out that there aren't any viable options that don't have a land cost, then we would bring that back as part of the final decision about whether to proceed. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I don't see any more questions. So on receipt, is anyone opposed to receipt? Okay, not hearing any. That passes unanimously. And on to the recommendation. Okay, and are there any questions or comments on the recommendation? Okay, I'll do a roll call for this one, starting with Major Stevens. Actually, I'll start with Director Cole Hamilton, since I know he's got his mic ready to go.
In favor.
Thank you. And Major Stevens can pipe in whenever he gets a sec. And I'll jump to Director Minions.
In favor?
Director Morin.
In favor.
Director Grant.
In favor?
Director Swift.
In favor.
And one last call for Major Stevens. I know he was expecting another call.
No, in favor.
Thank you very much. And I'm also in favor, so that passes unanimously. And we'll move on to number 3, procurement of conveyance solution engineers. Someone move receipt, please.
Move receipt.
Second.
And over to staff.
Thank you very much. And Chair and Commissioners, and Chris LaRose will provide an outline of this report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Russell. I believe I have a presentation coming up on the screen, Lisa. So I'll just get started. So the COVID-19 driven 6-month delay to the liquid waste management planning process did present an opportunity to significantly advance the level of analysis and due diligence associated with each of the conveyance options in advance of the conveyance decision being made. So the TAC PAC have now completed their evaluation, and staff are working to bring forward a recommended path forward to the Sewage Commission, and we expect to do that in early 2021. Rather than hold off on further progressing the project until then, staff are recommending that the service initiate procurement of engineers to help guide implementation of the conveyance solution now, and in parallel with that, go through a value engineering process to confirm the scope before the engineers begin implementation of the approach. There we go. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Very good. Next slide, please. Okay, and then the next one. Next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so the COVID delay also provided time to undertake other work to allow the service to expedite implementation once the conveyance decision is made, which included a procurement options analysis. So following a similar process to the one that we used to select a project delivery method for the Comox Valley Water Treatment Project, staff worked with Deloitte, the same firm used for that previous process, to identify, assess, and work towards a recommendation for the best procurement method for the conveyance project. So that analysis is nearing completion, and it is very likely, as you'll see from the results that I'll present here, very likely to recommend delivery of the conveyance project through one or possibly two design build contracts. So attached to the staff report as Appendix A is the draft procurement options analysis. So one of the pieces of the analysis that a key part of that work was a market sounding. So that was the first step undertaken by Deloitte. So this involved reaching out to or developing a list of several market players in each of the sectors that would be key for delivery of this project. So local contractors, larger EPC firms, so engineering, procurement, and construction firms that operate on the provincial and national level. In this case, given that there was a tunneling component to the project, they also included some tunneling firms, engineering firms. So they reach out to those entities with a list of questions and try and get a sense of how the project would be received if it was put out to market. And then that helped inform the feedback received, helped to inform the evaluation of the available options. So there were 10 options that were identified through the process. And so there were 4 options for an unphased approach to the conveyance, and 6 identified for the phased approach. And they included various permutations or iterations of design build versus design bid build, and then bundled as a single contract or more than one contract. And just as a very brief refresher on the difference between a design build versus a design bid build. So design bid build is the terminology used for the kind of the default approach to procuring, designing and building, procuring projects locally here, which would be, we would engage an engineering firm to develop a detailed design, so a highly prescriptive specification and design for what we would want built. And then once that was complete, we would use that to form the basis of a tender that would be put out to the market, and we would be looking specifically for firms that would be providing a set price to build a highly prescriptive project that we specify. So it's traditional. So that is our kind of default approach around here, but it does have some shortcomings. And the design build methodology has emerged different parts of the world at different times to kind of complement and in some cases provide some advantages. So the design build approach, we would hire an engineer, but the engineer would not be tasked with developing a detailed design for the project. They would rather be tasked with writing a performance-based specification of what we want to achieve with the infrastructure, rather than exactly what should be built. And then we would go out to procurement with that kind of more performance-based spec to hire a team combined of a combination of a designer and a builder. And so that touches on one of the key benefits to the design build approach for this project is that integration of the designer and the builder. In the traditional design bid build approach, not having those two parties working together throughout the design can introduce some problems in terms of the constructability, for example, of what's specified. That might not emerge until partway through the construction process. And one thing that design bid build contracts are quite vulnerable to is change orders. So if that shortcoming of the design was not discovered until partway through the contract, then the impact of that error or kind of a lack of foresight then becomes entirely of the owner to bear. It translates to an increase in cost. Whereas with the design build, those incidences are less likely to occur because the designer and the builder are working together. So just very briefly, the preliminary results of the assessment indicate, or kind of summarized on the bottom there, those are the 6 options, 6 phased options assessed through this process. And what they clearly identify is that options I and E are the highest ranked on the far right-hand side. And so both of those are a DB delivery. I is as a single contract, and E, so slightly lower score, would be for a design build contract with everything but the tunneling, and then a separate design build contract for the tunneling. So in both cases, those are both design build delivery, and there's a wide gulf in the scoring between I and E and the others, which are grouped farther back. So while the analysis is still in its final stages of completion, the outstanding tasks we don't believe will influence the outcome, and I think it opens up an opportunity now for us to get a jump on delivery of the project, even though we're still working towards the final decision on the conveyance. Next slide, please, Lisa. So the kind of the key points that led to the outcome. Well, the first I touched on briefly is that the complexity of the pump station upgrades that are part of the conveyance project would really benefit from collaboration between the designer and the builder. The reality is that our pump stations cannot be taken out of service at any point during the installation of the new conveyance solution. So in other words, that development of the plan for maintaining operations while those stations are being completely rebuilt is a very key factor. The second one is that the tunnel section must be delivered by a design build rather than design bid build to make full use of the contractor expertise that's inherent to that sector and their ability to take advantage of cost saving measures when the project comes up. For example, taking advantage of more favorable pricing for a slightly different pipe diameter, or being able to make use of a slightly different piece of machinery than might otherwise be specified by a detailed designer. And then lastly, and this is partially as a result of that market sounding, while local contractors are likely not able to respond directly to a large design build, the market sounding has demonstrated that they are more than willing to take on the subcontracting roles. So we just look to the Comox Valley Water Treatment Project as an example of a large design build contract being delivered locally, which has actually ended up with significant involvement from our local contractors. Roughly 90% of the work being done up there is being done by smaller contractors, many of them from the North Island. Next slide, please. So that takes us to the case for initiating procurement for an owner's engineer now. So an owner's engineer is the term provided for the engineering advisory role in a design build contract. And that would be in contrast with a detailed designer or detailed design engineer that would be hired for a design bid build. So the procurement process takes about 2 or 3 months, which is why we're hoping to get started on that right of way. And with the understanding that award of that contract would only take place after a decision by the Sewage Commission on conveyance. And we would be bringing forward the final decision on project delivery method at that same time. So key roles of the owner's engineer would be to develop the statement of requirements or the specification for the project, supporting the design build procurement process, and providing construction and commissioning oversight. Next slide, please. The second piece recommended in the staff report is that we proceed with hiring or proceed with the value engineering process in parallel with the procurement of an owner's engineer. So value engineering involves, and this is something that we employed very successfully on the Comox Valley Water Treatment Project. At the time, that was a requirement for to manage eligibility for the grant funding for that project. But we found it to be extremely valuable, and we see a strong role for it here as well. So that would involve hiring a facilitator and a team of experts to do an intensive 1-week review of the scope. And so they select the experts based on the project scope. So in this case, that you would expect to see a tunneling firm from elsewhere in the continent brought in. So tunneling, mechanical for the pump station upgrades, cost estimating, civil for the pipe works, some type of process engineer for the transition and the tie-in plans. And so you bring those experts that are completely unrelated, so providing that arm's length or third-party review of the scope, bring them into a room and let them at the scope. And so they review it in intense detail and then provide recommendations at the end of the week on methods for improving the scope and or reducing costs. So we feel there's a high likelihood of good value for the project, even aside from the benefit that the third-party review provides to the scope or the confidence. And ideally, this would be complete before the owner's engineer is selected or that award is made. So given that I estimate that roughly 2 to 3 months, we're well placed right now if we have the go ahead from the commission today to undertake that in parallel with the competition for the owner's engineer. Next slide, please. So next steps. So staff are recommending that you approve initiating the procurement for the owner's engineer and the value engineering exercise. We're aiming to bring forward a final decision on the project delivery method at the same time as the recommended conveyance solution in early 2021. And we're hoping to undertake the owner's engineer procurement, the value engineering process, and potentially the AAP or the first part of the AAP would be performed in parallel. And that's it for me. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. It's certainly a large report you've given us, so it seems like there's a lot of work going into even this one step in the process. Are there any questions on receipt? Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Not hearing any, that's unanimously approved. And maybe I could just get see if there are any hands up. And we're on to the recommendation. That's that competitive procurement process be initiated to select an engineering firm to act as owner's engineer and guide delivery of the conveyance solution to resolve the Willamar Bluffs force main risk, and further that staff undertake a value engineering exercise to provide third-party review of the preferred conveyance solution scope before implementation.
Move.
Second.
Thank you very much. And are there any questions or comments on the recommendation? Okay, not seeing any. I will call a question. I'll start with Major Stevens. And I'll get back to you as soon as you unmute yourself. Just feel free to jump in. Director Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Thank you. Director Swift.
In favor.
Director Grant.
In favor.
Director Morin.
In favor.
Director Minions.
In favor?
And Major Stevens.
You'll just have to finish with me in the future. In favor.
Wonderful. And I'm in favor as well. So that passes unanimously. Thanks very much. Staff. And then the last thing on our list is the in-camera resolution.
Second.
Thank you very much. And are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Director Minions.
In favor?
Yeah, well, it's up to you whether you're in favor or opposed.
In favor?
If we were all here, I'd just get a show of hands, but we're not. So Director Morin,
In favor.
Director Grant,
In favor.
Director Swift,
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton,
In favor.
Major Stevens,
In favor.